Well, welcome to the Botanical Medicine Study Course with me, your host and instructor, Stephanie Georgiev. Thanks to all who subscribe to this channel, and a big thanks to the Patreon community that is helping to keep this channel alive. Now, if you would like to receive exclusive content, please go to the Botanical Medicine Study Course Patreon page where starting in January, the weekly Herb of the Week posts will start taking place. Now, here on the public channel, we have monthly posts. And for a limited time, there are also weekly posts on the Botanical Medicine Study Course. We have finished in the course Botanical Families and are now well into systems, exploring everything from anatomy and physiology to energetic medicine approaches to health and illness, and of course, the amazing plants that are used to heal our bodies. This course will be on a formal platform in a few months, and the price will increase manifold. So get in on the ground level, so to speak, so that you can learn how to use the natural world to heal your body, soul, and spirit. Well, healthcare premiums are going up for lots of people. This course will still be very, very affordable until it goes off of Patreon and onto a regular platform. Now, for this month, the month of December 2025, we're going to explore something that is key to the natural world, and we're going to start seeing how it is also key to our health. We human beings, our health is also dependent on this wonderful, endless supply of this natural thing that's actually free. Now, December everywhere is a month of completion, but it's also a month of new beginnings. In the Northern Hemisphere, at least, winter begins in December, and the solstice, the winter solstice, is recognized. And I've always found it really interesting to contemplate that while we in the Northern Hemisphere are having shorter days and longer nights, it's the opposite in the Southern Hemisphere. So while we have the shortest day on our winter solstice, on the opposite side of the planet, they're having their longest day and their summer solstice. And if you ever talk to people like from Australia, they always say, yeah, on Christmas we go to the beach, and it's hot. And, especially for us in the northern latitudes, that's not something we can do. Most of us, some people do, but I'm not going to do that. So December holidays have a little bit more significance, and they're all about celebrating the light. And Hanukkah is the festival of lights, where the miraculous oil kept the candles going during a siege. Pagans celebrate the winter solstice and Yule, which is the recognition that the sun is on its way back to warm the world and waken nature. And Christmas is also a celebration of the birth of the light of the world. So I thought it would be interesting as well as timely, as I am in the Northern Hemisphere, to explore that amazing star that is the center of our universe, the sun. So for this month's study, we're going to consider light, plants, and health. Now, I'm not sure how many of you were sky watching. I think it was in April of 2024, but there was this total solar eclipse that started in Mexico, and the path went over the United States and Canada. And it was such an interesting phenomena because so much and so many educational initiatives and scientific endeavors were surrounding this event. And I'm talking in the middle of nowhere, places like in Texas, where, political and, religious divides were pitting community members against one another, they were able to come together at the public library and with their schools to really mark this event. And, lots of people, were renting out their houses and selling, soul, selling eclipse stuff. And it just was a really interesting thing. And something else that happened that time, and there's a wonderful YouTube channel. It's also an app. You can watch NASA TV. And during solar eclipses, it's really fun. They have NASA people all during the path of, total eclipse. And they just keep, so it's so exciting. It's so exciting. And they talk about the different scientific things that are going on in terms of the eclipse. And what was interesting with this last total solar eclipse over the United States is that NASA launched what's called a heliophysics department, which is dedicated to intense and focused study of the sun. Now, for the last several decades, the sun has gotten a bit of a bad rap. Ozone depletion in the atmosphere and greenhouse gases building up have caused the earth to warm, and we have less protection from the rays emanating from the sun. Now, this is not the sun's fault. This, regardless of how many times certain news stations say that it's a hoax, it's not a hoax. Human activity is altering our atmosphere. And unfortunately, one of the outcomes of this is being out in the sun is now seen as a health hazard. And ecosystems are definitely changing. And I can tell you, as a longtime resident of this beautiful state of California, um, the lengthy droughts and the terrible fires that just seem to be year-round now are a result of the changes that are happening because of what humans are doing to the atmosphere. But what is also, interesting because of this change in the atmosphere, there are a lot of efforts to prevent skin cancer. And, so people are slathering on sunscreen and, like 50 and above. And also people are inside more and more for all sorts of reasons. And there's been an interesting trend that's been noticed in healthcare in general, which actually has a lot to do with our relationship with the sun. Now, there's a wonderful YouTube channel I highly recommend to everyone, and it's put on by a medical school professors in the Inland Empire of Southern California. And the channel is called MedCram, and these professors simply review studies and research and help those of us who may not have medical degrees to understand what's going on in the world of medicine and research. Now, one recent program really piqued my curiosity in that it covered some new data involving COVID-19 statistics. Now, when COVID-19 was first in public awareness, to be fair to everybody, no one really knew what was going on. The severity and speed that it spread and how it affected people just simply overwhelmed the healthcare system, along with public healthcare practices. And everything changed daily, and it was confusing. And then what it did was it caused a large segment of the population not to trust science and research and physicians and public health officials. Um, so that was one of the problems with that. And it was basically because research was just not able to keep up with the onslaught. And I had some really interesting conversations with researchers at that time. And this was in the early days of the shutdown. And just listening to what they were trying to do in terms of collecting data. But now that we're several years out of the pandemic, Some hard numbers are now available, and regardless of what side of the pandemic origins and solutions you are, these studies for me were really remarkable, and I heard them on this wonderful channel, MedCram. So highly, highly recommend uh, subscribing to that channel. Now, what everyone was aware of in the beginning of the pandemic was that people who were dying of COVID-19 had low levels of vitamin D in their systems. They tended to be obese or have some sort of diabetes, meaning they had either type 1 or type 2 diabetes. Now, people who survived a severe COVID infection before the antivirals and all those amazing medicines were available, these people who survived had higher levels of vitamin D in their systems. So the people who were dying had low levels of vitamin D, and the people who were surviving had higher levels of vitamin D. And so people such as myself I didn't particularly want to die of COVID. So I started taking lots of vitamin D. Now, supplementing with vitamin D is great for everyone. It really is. And it's a key factor in whether or not someone has enough vitamin D in their system is actually related to sun exposure. So it's wonderful to take a supplement. But one of the things that goes on in your body, particularly in your skin, and it doesn't matter your melanin content, it doesn't matter if you're African American or Latino or Asian or Caucasian, Native American, you still produce vitamin D if you're exposed to sunlight. And the other thing, which I thought was really interesting, because I started looking at, well, why are people so low in vitamin D? What's that about? And not only is it sun exposure, but people who, if you consume a lot of high fructose corn syrup, which is in most processed foods and is the main sweetening agent in sodas, which are drunk more than water in the United States. Um, and these sodas with this high fructose corn syrup are a major source of empty calories, and they contribute to obesity. So that was really kind of interesting. It's kind of not related, but really related. And these studies that I was hearing about in the MedCram channel were reporting that it seemed that COVID was more deadly in areas more north, meaning away from the equator, which means less sunshine. And the physician on this wonderful MedCram station was basically stating that what the research was saying was that if people had more exposure to natural sunlight in general, that their health was better in general. And they actually had less incidence of COVID. And if they did get COVID, they tended to recover. So I think that's really interesting. But the key was natural sunlight and not artificial lights, not the light through the windows and all this other stuff. You needed to be outside looking at the sun. And this physician was also quoting studies showing that if people were getting about an hour a day of natural sunlight, they tended to heal faster, and particularly from surgery. Now, vitamin D, this is the chemical structure of vitamin D, and there's all sorts of different names for this. Cholecalciferol, and there's all sorts of Ds, D3s, and D this and D that. But when the skin is exposed to sunlight, which we also call UV ultraviolet radiation, the skin synthesizes the precursor molecule for vitamin D. And this vitamin is essential for calcium absorption in the small intestine. And that's why a lot of our dairy products, um, particularly industrial ones, they have extra vitamin D put in them because what that does is it increases the likelihood that you're going to absorb the calcium from the dairy. Now, when skin is exposed to ultraviolet B, as in boy, UVB radiation from the sun, it converts a cholesterol-related molecule into an inactive form of vitamin D, and this is vitamin D3, which you can also take as a supplement. And this inactive form is then converted into the active hormone in the liver and the kidneys, where it performs all sorts of functions. Now, vitamin D's primary job is to significantly increase the efficacy and efficiency with which the intestines absorb calcium from food. And if you don't get enough vitamin D, the body can only absorb a small percent of dietary calcium, regardless of how much calcium is absorbed. But if you have a lot of calcium absorption, vitamin D provides this necessary building block, particularly for bone mineralization. And what's also interesting is that vitamin D also plays a vital role in supporting muscle movement and strength. Vitamin D also regulates the immune response, and the immune response is how your body deals with being ill, which can aid the body in fighting off bacteria and viruses. And remember, COVID-19 is a virus. And this is also good for cells that aren't doing well, and particularly older cells in the body. And vitamin D is really good for reducing overall inflammation, and inflammation is also a big bugaboo in illness in general. Now, all of this got me to thinking about the sun and its effect on plants, but also humans and the relationship, how this relationship actually works. Now, for people taking my botanical medicine class through Patreon, they're familiar with the concept that comes from anthroposophical medicine and biodynamics, that a human is, it's a metaphor. Some people, we can certainly see this more than others, but a human is an upside down plant. And so they say the head is related to the roots of the plant, the leaves are related to the respiratory system and the rhythmic system, and the flowers are related to the digestive metabolic system. Now, obviously, this is not a hard and fast rule, but the whole leaf thing related to the respiratory system, which includes the heart, I found especially interesting. Basically, because of classical medical theory, meaning thousands of years ago, the heart was seen as related to the sun. Now, this is an actual picture of chloroplasts in moss, and this is courtesy from Wikimedia Commons. And these little things are just miraculous. I just can't get over chloroplasts, really. They're also so-called light eaters in plants because chloroplasts are the powerhouse of green plants. And these little miracle organs in plants, they take in the light and they convert it to sugar, to carbohydrates. Now, there's a wonderful book on herbs, which I highly recommend. It's called The Light Eaters. That's the title. And it's basically what plants are. They eat lights and they eat light, and specifically from the sun, and they transform it, and we eat that light. We eat the sunlight when we eat the plant. So when you're sipping your kale smoothie or munching on your spinach salad or any other plant or fruit that has green leaves on its original plant, just remember you are eating transformed light. Now, this is another diagram from Wikipedia Commons, which shows the structure of the chloroplast in detail. But these are all the little organelles inside of the chloroplasts. So it's like when you crunch in on that kale, it's like that's what you're eating. And what these little organelles do is they take in the light from the sun and they transform it into carbohydrates. And the goal of the chloroplast is to build up glucose or sugar from carbon dioxide, carbon dioxide and water, and they use light energy. And the input to the chloroplast is light, carbon dioxide, and water. And this whole process is called photosynthesis, which some of us learned a lot about in our biology class. But this process, photosynthesis, creates the fuel, which is sugar and oxygen, that humans use in our cells for what's called cellular respiration. Now, this is what's inside of all of human and animal cells, but particularly human. And this is the powerhouse structure in every cell of your body that gives life. Okay. And they're called mitochondrion, and mitochondria is actually the plural. And this is really impressive, if you ask me. What the mitochondria do is they break down the sugar and they use oxygen to create energy. And in chemistry, and I'm sure if you've ever studied this in your biology class, it's called ATP, but that's energy. And this is why we need to breathe in oxygen as well as eat food, particularly from plants that provide carbohydrates, which provide glucose and sugar for our bodies. So, this is a really interesting thought. How is the sun, plants, and humans all related? And how does this work basically for health? Now, the plant world provides quite a bit for humanity. Plants provide us with food, they provide us with clothing, provide us with medicine, which is what you'll learn about in the Botanical Medicine Study Course on Patreon. You'll learn all about that. And they also, plants provide us with shelter, wood for growing wood so we can build houses. And plants also provide oxygen for us to breathe. And the reciprocal relationship, and we know that, our mitochondria use that oxygen, which creates energy. And the reciprocal relationship between humans and plants is the plants give us oxygen and we breathe it in, and we breathe out carbon dioxide, and the plants breathe that in. But there's actually more of a connection. And what it is the light from the sun. In plants, the transformation of the sunlight is called photosynthesis. In humans, we also transform sunlight. First, in terms of eating plants, which are light eaters, so we're eating those light eaters, but also in a process called photobiomodulation. And if you take any of my classes, you're going to get more Scrabble nouns than you know what to do with. And here's one, use a ton of letters. But there is a molecule in humans that absorbs light within the mitochondria, and it is called the cytochrome C oxidase, or CCO. And this terminal enzyme in the electron transport chain, and those of you who've taken a lot of biology, you know what I'm talking about. And this is cellular respiration. And cellular respiration is a fancy word for cells just making it possible for us to live with all that oxygen and sugar and energy and all that stuff. Now, when red light or near infrared light, which is in full spectrum sunlight, hits these enzymes, it acts as a stimulant and speeds up energy formation in the mitochondria. Now, near infrared light wavelengths are unique because they can penetrate deeply through skin, fat, and muscle, and even pass through the human body. And this means that light exposure on one area of the skin has a complete effect on the entire body, which means it affects all mitochondria throughout your entire body. So if you're looking at the sun with your face, it's going to affect your toes. Isn't that interesting? And it also benefits mitochondria in places like your brain and in the in your eye. That's really interesting. Now, the effects are thought to be particularly beneficial for aged, which is me, and deceased cells. So, people who are suffering from chronic diseases where mitochondria function is impaired. So, if you're older or you're suffering from a chronic disease, you can pick one. It's really important to get sunlight because that helps the mitochondria in those diseased and aging cells to combat chronic illness. So this is really interesting, isn't it interesting? This two two um, functions in plants and humans that are dependent on sunlight, exposure to sunlight. Now, the two organelles, the mitochondria and the chloroplast, the most compelling connection between these, animals and humans and plants is the theory of endosymbiosis, which states that these organelles that we're talking about, the mitochondria and the chloroplast, were actually once independent organisms. The mitochondria were thought to have evolved from ancient free-living aerobic bacteria, and chloroplasts were thought to have evolved from ancient free-living photosynthesis and cyanobacteria. So it's kind of interesting when you think of quote unquote the Big Bang, which I like to call the cosmic bursting forth. That's when it started, all those billion years ago. Now, these two organelles, the mitochondria and the chloroplast, have really interesting, strikingly similar structures. They both have their own DNA, they replicate independently, and use the exact same fundamental principle, this electron transport chain, and it converts one form of energy into another. And they use a universal chemical energy resource. Therefore, the way sunlight charges your mitochondria is an echo of the way sunlight charges the plant's chloroplasts. Both are ancient biological machines designed to optimize energy conversion using light. And the structure in the human cells that is functionally and structurally similar to chloroplasts in plants is the mitochondrion. Both are organelles known as powerhouses um, in their respective cell types because they are primary sites for energy conversion. Now, I don't know if you have or not, but you are familiar, I'm sure, with full spectrum light, and there's all sorts of different aspects to light, and some of it we see and some we don't see. Um, but the big message is that you really need to have exposure to all of this type of light. You can go to the blue and infrared and all sorts of things like that. And that really helps do all sorts of things that we need to do to live. But the other thing is that plants need uh, lead exposure to light, and they're also very dependent on light and on the full breakdown. They need blue light, they need red light and green light. They need all sorts of different lights, even ultraviolet light. They really need that. And all of these different exposures to full spectrum light in plants actually stimulates them to produce substances that are incredibly healing to humanity, like antioxidants and anthocyanins, things like that, that help human bodies to fight disease. So, this is so interesting to me that light is very key to both plant and human health, and also inspires plants to create substances that are healing to humans when we take them internally by eating them. So, something as simple as getting enough sun exposure, being outside, particularly at dawn, is an incredible way you can be healthy in general. And it doesn't matter what time of year you decide to do this, but it really is that dawn. And for many years, I had the wonderful privilege of hiking in canyons in Southern California. And I always went out like before dawn so that I could watch the dawn. And I'm telling you, it just made me feel so much better. Um, and I didn't know all of these things. But the physician in that wonderful MedCram video is trying his best to spread the word and encourage hospitals and his students to have patients get regular sunlight exposure, natural sunlight exposure, as part of their treatment regimens, particularly people recovering from surgery. And the key is getting enough infrared light, which is not present in artificial lighting. And this wonderful physician is sounding the alarm that some upcoming policies are going to make it that artificial lighting gets no infrared light at all, which, because we get very little of it in artificial lights, we're noticing all sorts of interesting diseases and allergies and all of that. Um, so we need to make sure that we're getting this natural sunlight. And it basically means you go outside and it's there and just go outside and greet the sun. So there's so many relationships we have on Earth and throughout the universe, actually. One of my favorites is gravity. And gravity is basically saying the whole universe is basically in relationship with everything else, just the sun, the moon, the planets, the stars. And obviously we're not being flung off this, the earth is moving really fast, actually, and we don't get flung off because of gravity. Sometimes gravity is a little challenging, but I'm grateful for it. And one of the most amazing relationships we have is with our central star, our sun. It offers so much to us. And so I hope whatever festival of light you're celebrating, wherever you are on the northern or southern hemisphere, that you really treasure this wonderful relationship we have with the sun and that it will illuminate your soul during the entire year. And so this is Stephanie Georgia saying thank you so much for spending your valuable time with me. Please go to my Patreon page, become a member, learn how to take care of yourself, learn how to figure out how to use the sun in plants to facilitate your healing. And whatever festival you're celebrating, I wish you a happy and peaceful and healthy one. And until next month, I hope all of you will be well. Happy festivals and a blessed new year. And I'll see you in January of 2020. 26.